Hello and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, here celebrating the 50th anniversary of the film Jaws. Now, I am not a big fan of the F word. I'm not talking about film. I'm talking about the word favorite. And I hate to say things are my favorite because I hate to say that I love something so much more than something else that I just, because I just want to enjoy everything I enjoy. But there are certain things I think are arguably my favorite. To say that the album by Rainbow Down to Earth is my favorite, I think it's fairly safe to say because I have probably listened to that album more than any other album. But to say that this film is my favorite, I think I could also make a very good case for that. I think I've seen Jaws more than any other film I've ever watched. Saw it at first at just a couple years old at the drive-in, and I'm sure that's had no impact on how I am as a person at all. But here to join me to talk about this historical moment in movie history is my good friend Mark Roback. Mark, how are you?
I am doing great. Oh, voice is a little raspy there for a moment, but
I see you're as choked up as I am.
Yeah, doing great. So excited to be on this to talk about Jaws because I think it is my favorite, and I saw it when I was 9 years old. Mm-hmm. So the impact on that, and it was almost like it was a forbidden fruit, being 9 and going in because the ads back then said maybe too intense for younger children. Oh. And my brothers, who were 6 and 7 years older than me, had seen it, and they were like, "Oh, it's great," or whatever. And then it's like, "Oh, I'd love to see it." And it's like, I think they helped convince my mom and dad. It's like, "Oh, can we take Mark to go see it?" And it's like, yeah, I want to say, beyond me like loving it so much, it may be, in my opinion, the greatest film of all time. It's certainly up there. It certainly would be in like a top 10 for me in terms of rating it that way.
Sure.
But certainly a favorite. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you see it in a traditional theater or at the drive-in?
A traditional theater. Yeah, I remember the name of the theater was Cinema City down in the South Meadows. It was right near this sewage treatment plant, actually, down there and kind of the outskirts, which on a bad day would not smell too good. But
right.
That was the theater when I was a kid. That was kind of the closest, I think. So it's no longer a theater. They turned it into something else. I don't know. But,
I saw it at the Gratiot Drive-In between 13 and 14 Mile in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and mostly slept through the first half of it in the back seat and woke up right before the key moment where the shark makes its first real appearance. And after that, of course, I could not go to sleep. The movie affected me to the point where, and remember, I'm just a couple years old, but I was terrified to take a bath because I was positive that the shark could come through that, 1-inch wide hole in the drain, this 25-foot shark, and eat me. And it certainly had its impact for sure. I don't know that I would have appreciated how much I actually appreciated the movie at the time because, I mean, what did I know at, being a couple years old? But certainly grateful that I saw it. And I do remember specifically seeing on the big screen, the Roy Scheider and the look on his face and that terror. And I think I kind of at least understood that we were in a moment of intensity or fear or whatever it might have been that I interpreted as at the time, because that is such a turning point in the film where you actually realize the depth of the situation.
Yeah. I remember it fairly vividly, just in terms of those big moments where the audience reacts. Maybe we'll get into. I don't know the format we're going to talk about, but
I have no idea.
I would think maybe we could just kind of start to finish, start going through the film and talk about the scenes that struck us or whatever. But but yeah, I do remember those big scenes. I remember the theater being packed, even though I think we went in the daytime in the summer. And then yeah, there's lots of, so over the years, people, I made it known that I had liked the Jaws. So probably since the early 90s, there's a group of people I worked with that call me Chief, because I used to go, I worked second shift, and we used to go fishing sometimes in the summer after. And I was actually quoting Quint through the whole fishing trip or whatever, but they started calling me Chief or Chiefy. And then in honor of, I don't know if you can see this, but I got a special shirt on here. So it's the Quint's chalk drawing of the shark, which is the scene we'll talk about, I'm sure. And also, so in 2015, somebody got me the, it would have been the 40th anniversary DVD edition. It is unopened.
Wow.
Yeah, I never watched it, but what's cool is I wonder if this is still available, because it's says instantly stream or download digital copy. Oh no, redeemed by April 30th, 2015. Oh.
But, you know, over time, there will be less and less sealed copies of that, giving it more and more value.
Yeah, it's a digital remastered and fully restored from high resolution 35 millimeter original film elements.
Nice.
So
Now, do you know what the error is on the cover of the movie?
no, is this the fact that you didn't know, or is this
No.
something? Oh,
No,
okay.
this one I knew.
Okay.
That is not a great white shark. That is a mako shark.
Oh, really? It's just
Yes,
by the what? By the teeth arrangement,
by the
or
teeth.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, it always struck me that the teeth were a little odd.
Yeah, and I think makos are a little more narrow and slimline than a great white, which I think like facial wise they're a little wider and less triangular.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Yeah. So
But I
I
think
have a
it just looked more menacing that way. Because if you actually look at a picture of a great white shark from that angle and you turn it upside down, it looks like it's smiling,
Oh, okay.
which
Yeah.
is less
Yeah.
terrifying, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, that's okay. That's fine. I do have a couple other things. So somewhere along the line, probably again, maybe the early 90s or something, somebody had gone to Florida and they bought this plastic shark for me. And then I was doing the lawn and I hit, back in the 70s, you had your GI Joe, and then there was like a cheaper model called Fighting Yank, and I had one, and somehow the head got like lost in the yard for years, and then I hit it with the lawnmower.
Oh no.
And I picked it up, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? So I took the head, put it in my plastic shark, and that was sitting for a while. It was sitting on the dashboard of my car, and then it was on my desk since till I retired, actually. So
Oh,
that's
that's
a cool
great.
thing. One of my, I think, my niece or nephew got me this shirt, and it's kind of dear to my heart. So the shirt is
Nice.
basically the movie cover, with the shark, and it's dear to my heart because Gail used to wear this around the house all the time, like as a night shirt.
I
So
like that.
that was
Yeah.
pretty good. And I got one more item here. There's actually more because my nephew's wife is very artistic, and she like painted these little rocks with Jaws scenes on it. But see if I can do this. They got me this glass, and
Ooh.
inside it has, again, the shark from the cover coming up through the middle of it, hollowed out. So if you put a beverage in there, depending upon the beverage, it's not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. But you see a shark in there. But the shark takes up like probably a third of the glass, so you can't fit that much liquid in it. But
you could put some like cherry Kool-Aid in there and make it look like the shark's on attack. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's cool. I've never seen that before. That's really cool.
yeah.
I
So
almost got a Jaws shirt, but I got the Ghostbuster shirt instead for my interview with Spring Paranormal Investigations when I hit episode 500. But I saw the Jaws shirt and I'm like, I kind of want that too. You know?
yeah.
But I had, when I was a kid, I had the Jaws plastic Jaws game. I don't know if you had this one, Mark. I would imagine Pete has it somewhere in his attic, but
Yeah.
it was a plastic shark, and the mouth was held open by the weight of these plastic pieces like anchors and tires and things like that. And you would take
Okay.
a plastic boat hook, and your job was to grab a piece without making the shark close its mouth. So you had to make sure that you selected something that kept enough weight to keep his mouth open. Otherwise, you were the loser of the game. If the shark bit down on your boat oar or your pole, then you lost. And
Huh.
it was actually a lot of fun. It was a neat little game, and it's something that before we were so dependent on electronics and things to entertain us. Um, we had a lot of those fun little games back in the '60s and '70s, and I think of games like, I don't know if you ever played Perfection or Superfection, where you had to hurry up and get all the pieces in the thing before the board jumped up and pushed all the
Oh,
pieces off, and
oh yeah, yeah.
things that really depended on just intelligence and ingenuity instead of all these wonderful electronic things that we have now. I kind of long for the simplicity of those days.
Yeah, yeah. God, I remember you remember that game Mousetrap too, and
Hmm.
it's like we hardly ever played the game. We just built the trap and set it off because it was like that Rube Goldberg thing or
Right.
whatever. And then battling tops. I don't know if you remember that
Hmm.
game. There was like a yeah, and I remember as teenagers we were playing that and trash talking so much like during the round. It was like a lot of fun. But yeah, that stuff it was entertaining. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There
for
was
sure.
one game that came out, I think it was in the early 80s, and it was called Crossbows and Catapults. And you had I mean, it was a huge box, and you had all these plastic pieces to build your castle. One player had a crossbow, the other one had a catapult, and you had like these round plastic puck-looking things. And your whole goal was to kind of knock over the flag of the opponent, which would be hidden somewhere in the behind the castle wall. And so
Yeah.
you're just flinging these pucks back and forth at each other, trying to knock the castle apart. And it took like a half an hour to set the game up and 5 minutes to play it. It was one of
Yeah.
those things where like it was nowhere near as fun as it appeared like it was going to be. So I think we played it like two or three times and it ended up in a garage sale.
Yeah, yeah. One other one I remember was Rock'em Sock'em Robots, where it was
Hmm.
these mechanical robots. But the joke about that was always there was always one that had like a looser spring, So it's like, oh, I
Right.
want the red one. No, I want the red one because you'd hit the jaw and it would pop up earlier or whatever from
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember too, there were games that had spinning bottoms underneath them, like Sunken Treasure was one and King Oil was another. And so they had
Mm.
these slots, kind of like Operation, but they were kind of thin and they had that metal around the edges. So you couldn't touch the edge, but you had to, like with Sunken Treasure, you had to get these little coins that were underneath. And there was like gold, silver, and bronze, and you would get different points by whichever coin you got, but they were really challenging. And then you would, every once in a while, you would spin the bottom of the game to change the position of everything. And King Oil was one where you had this oil derrick and all these holes, and you would put the derrick on the hole and see if you struck oil or not based on the underneath of the board, and then you would cap it based on how much oil was in it. It was like they were really neat ideas for games, and I feel like board games, I guess, are kind of making a comeback, but I think it's more like Life and Monopoly and the real more popular ones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a shame. But we're not here to talk about the history of board games. We're here to talk
No.
about Jaws. So before we go any further, though, I do want to make a little side announcement. Now, this episode is going to come out in 2 weeks as we're recording it. So our episode, I was very honored to be a guest on the 70s Weekly Countdown with Mark and Pete. Mark being Mark of Mark and Pete. And we had a great time covering one-hit wonders, and yeah, I just had such a blast hanging out with you guys. Thanks so much for having me on. That episode should be available already. Should be out for a couple weeks by now.
Yes, yeah, yes, it will. As we record this, like, going to be releasing it tomorrow. So,
Mhm.
yep. So it should be out a couple weeks. It's getting released in time for 4th of July weekend, as I said, so that our 4 listeners can listen to it while they're commuting to their holiday get-togethers or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully returning with all their fingers, as that's often the big question is how many people will lose a finger on the 4th of July.
I hate to say it. I don't know if I don't know what it is, but it's like it's almost like every year I look forward to those news films where they show the mannequins getting their fingers blown off, and then, it's like the warning every year. It's like that must be a fun job. I'm going to set up a mannequin and blow the fingers off.
It's such an interesting thing that as animal safety has become a much bigger thing, and we know how sensitive animals are to explosives and things like that. We have the capability to make fireworks soundless, but there's so much less excitement in the visual without that sound, that crack to go with it. It's such an interesting thing, the times that we live in, where you have people that are battling to, make fireworks soundless to protect the animals, and other people that are like, no, this is the 4th of July. This is, celebrating victory and from battles and things like that. And it should represent everything is turned into just such a big argument anymore. I'd like going back to the 70s and watching movies where we didn't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah, certainly it was different times. Yeah. Again, as we go through some of the scenes, I can think of some things specifically that we'll talk about, culturally or whatever. But yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to share my fact that I discovered, because it won't play into our chronological review of the movie. I did not know there was a Simpsons tie to Jaws. Did you know that?
I would imagine they referenced it at some point, but I don't know an actual tie. So
now there may have been a Simpson reference during The Simpsons, but this actually happened during Jaws that would later become a connection to The Simpsons. And I pulled up the cast because I can never remember anyone's name. And I saw that Harry Shearer is listed as being credited in Jaws. Harry Shearer would do the voice of many characters on The Simpsons, Reverend Lovejoy, Mr. Burns, one of my favorite characters. I don't know if he did Professor Frink or not, but that's another one of my favorites who I believe they unfortunately killed off. But when so I was like, he's just uncredited though. It just says Harry Shearer, not a character he played. So I dug into it a little more, and it says, luckily, Shearer replied both confirming and denying that he is indeed in Jaws. It says Shearer responded that he was part of an early Loop group, a crew of voice-based actors who made stock recordings of situations used to be put in the background of films. So think of like a Wilhelm scream, things that they just recorded in the studio as stock footage to throw in the background of film. So, a lot of times especially when you're on location, and even more so when you're outdoors in a completely uncontrolled environment, it's very difficult to get audio. You have to bring the actors back into the studio and re-record some of their dialogue. That's called ADR. And but to make those scenes work, since you can't use the audio from the take, you have to go back and refill in the background. So to be able to do that and make it look realistic, a lot of times they'll go through stock footage libraries where they've recorded ocean sound, beachgoers, screams, laughter, traffic noises, gunshots, all that kind of stuff. And they use those clips to put into the film to bring you the illusion that they actually recorded all that on location. It's most tricky for the actors because they have to match what they said on the visual. So they have to speak with the same timing. That can take a lot of effort. With the ADR, you could be matching, some to visual, like gunshots, for example. But with most of the background noise, you can just kind of throw it in the background and you're typically okay. So that is how Harry Shearer became associated with Jaws. And I had no idea. I saw his picture. I'm like, isn't that Harry Shearer? And I looked down. I'm like, yeah, it's Harry Shearer. Who was he in Jaws? And so it sent me on this very minimal effort trip. And there's our answer.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So is he credited with quite a few films doing that back then, or
I don't know. I didn't go through his bio in full, but I would imagine a lot of people probably don't pick up on that kind of stuff. I think it
Yeah.
just depends on who's doing the credits and how far they're willing to go. A lot of people just get sick and tired of it, and they're like, this person, this person, this person, this person, and here's who
Yeah.
they were, blah blah blah, and just move on. And then there's other people that kind of dig into it. Then there's more like the research people that will like go in and look and see. Okay, well, I'm doing a biography on Jaws, and most likely was discovered that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's quite interesting though.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean his voiceover work, uh the stuff he definitely is credited for must be quite extensive as well.
Well,
Yeah.
he's got such a beautiful, deep voice, and he's so good
Yeah.
at character acting. He's
Yeah.
just like the
Yeah.
perfect guy to be on a cartoon.
Yeah.
Mark, let me ask you this. Do you think that Jaws is a horror film?
Well, I when you asked that, I was like, well, how do you define a horror film? Um, I I would tend to say no, or not necessarily in the way that I think of horror films. I almost think of horror films more to be a little bit um, a little bit disconnected from perhaps reality, a little bit more supernatural
Hmm.
or whatever. You might contend that the way the shark acts in the film is somewhat supernatural, or maybe unrealistic or whatever. But I think there's been enough true incidents of shark attacks and stuff like that that I think it's more of a thriller. I would
Hmm.
call it, really. And at least in my view, in terms of watching it, other than a few jump scares, it's more the intensity that really, as I said, the ad in 1975 was maybe too intense for younger children,
Hmm.
wasn't maybe too horrifying for younger children, but just the sort of tension and intensity. So that's my take.
I that's what I was thinking too. I when I think of horror films, I tend to think of visual gore, not necessarily a lot of murder, but gore. That is to me the kind of the line where a film either is or isn't a horror film. Like a lot of people think that the original miniseries of It is one of the greatest horror films, and I don't think that is either. I think it's very much a thriller. And I find it fascinating that when you think about when this came out, though, we really didn't have a lot before this that would send people screaming and running out of a theater or vomiting in the theater. I mean, we're just getting to the point now where we're getting movies like Halloween. And, before that, we had Hitchcock and not a lot we had monster movies. We had
Mm,
Frankenstein and the Wolfman, which were, I mean, the original Nosferatu, I think a terrifying movie, especially if you think about it at the time. But really, this was one of the first films in that would really start the era of intense thrillers, because I think the reaction was newspaper articles like that because there was really nothing preceding it. People watch it now and they think it's a fairly tame movie, but if you put it in context of when it came out, this was a this was huge.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, what what year did The Exorcist come out?
I
I
think
mean,
that was
that I would call,
73, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, I would call that a horror movie,
Yes.
or things like Rosemary's Baby.
Mm,
There was the original Night of the Living Dead.
mm,
Um,
that's
but
right.
yeah, but in terms of I don't know. I don't know. I think again, one of the things I love about the movie though is it seems, for the most part, to me, even still today, to be feasible. And I think that's why it's like, well, with The Exorcist, it's like you didn't scare anybody from, going to their child's bedroom, I don't think. But
Right. Yeah.
with, people were generally afraid to go to the beach, and for perhaps good reason. It's like, and just in general, that thing of, you have the ocean, and what is lurking underneath, you don't know. You wade out into the ocean and then you're kind of like, well, nothing's going to touch me. Mm-hmm. You know, and then you feel some seaweed and it's like, oh, you know, what the heck was that? Yeah. I was just, it made me think of it too. Perhaps one of the reasons before I was born, the family used to take trips to Cape Cod in the summer. And there's a picture of my father caught a sand shark with his bare hands. He was wading out in the water. And I think it was like half dead or something. It swam by. So he grabbed it by the tail. And there's a picture of him and his drinking buddy, Art Maycock, which is a great drinking buddy name, holding the shark, and they got like sunglasses on and cigarettes in the mouth.
But anyway. Was that the shark that killed Ben Gardner? That's the question.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Now, you mentioned that this is a realistic concept, and this was based originally, Peter Benchley's novel was based on a true incident of a shark that somehow got inland and kind of went on a bit of a murder spree, or they suspect it was one shark. There's theories that it was a couple of different sharks that actually, because it was kind of like a more widespread area of attacks. But I mean, yeah, this is a very real thing. And that's, I think, one of the things that I love about this movie is you could show me a movie like, Friday the 13th or Halloween or things where, these aren't realistic. I don't fear the concept of, this guy who you could just shoot over and over and over again, and he's just going to keep coming at you. I don't fear stuff like that because it's just, I mean, other than certain cases of people being hopped up on drugs, it's a very minimal amount of opportunities where that's going to happen. That's why I enjoy movies more that are potentially realistic, like a person who, and they often, you'll notice this as part of Jaws too, but there's a whole series of movies where they isolate people. It's a house in the woods. It's a house that's really, a ritzy place where people are far away from civilization. Neighbors are 3 miles away. They're not going to hear anybody scream. And this movie is also about that isolation, putting people on a boat where they can't get help. They can't just immediately call the police and have the police come investigate. They can't, they're out there and they're pretty trapped.
Yeah, and I was almost thinking too, as you were talking, in terms of genres, that the pre Jaws in the 70s, you had the big disaster films, like you mentioned, Towering Inferno, and then there was the Poseidon Adventure, and then all the airport movies, which was essentially, again, taking situations that could happen. Poseidon Adventure was, perhaps a little bit out there with this huge thing capsizing, but Towering Inferno, stuff like that still happens in high rises, and then of course, people could relate to like being on a plane and something going wrong. So, but not horror films, but a thriller and a sense that when you left that, after seeing Towering Inferno, I think you get in an elevator in a high rise and you're kind of like, well, yeah, what if there was a fire and I was caught in here, or the elevator stopped, and how am I going to get down? And well, if you look at 9/11, people couldn't get down from the towers. And I mean, that was what Towering Inferno, the people were stuck up at the top. Yeah. So,
and on top of that, you've got the kind of unspoken factor that heat rises, and you're talking about a pretty big fire. Yeah. So you're also dealing with the intensity of the heat, the air quality, and all those things too. The people potentially just blacking out and not being able to do anything to save themselves. But that's the beauty of the isolation and making a situation that people could face. And now, as bizarre as it seems, and this sounds like something that would have come from a movie, but it's actually true. Sea creatures are now knowing how to attack boats and disable them. You've got killer whales that have figured out how to do this. They're somehow, and this is the amazing thing about the animal kingdom, is they're passing this information on to each other, telling them how to disable boats. How they're doing that, I have no idea. But they can actually do that now. And I was talking to my friend yesterday that the animal kingdom fascinates me because you look at, say, hippos, for example, or lion prides. they can't communicate like we do. They can't write out instructions. They can't give you classes on how to do things. Yet somehow, through trial and error, through repetition or whatever it is, they learn their place. They learn the pecking order. They learn when they can eat. They learn who eats first. They learn how to hunt. They learn how to hunt in packs. They learn all these things. It's absolutely amazing what the animal kingdom is capable of. And I am just endlessly baffled by, like, how do killer whales know to attack a shark and just eat the liver and not care about the rest of it? Like,
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
the whole thing be valuable?
yeah, yeah. That stuff amazes me to the point. Well, I always say, I'm a retired engineer, and so I lived in the world of you know basically explaining things. Math explains how things work and etc. But there's a part of me that doesn't. There's some things you just can't explain.
Yeah.
And yeah, like things that either came through evolution somehow, but yeah, that behavior type thing that's passed down through evolution, that's like weird to me. I can almost see where, like, well, you get a mutation of some physical form and that helps the animal survive better, so that mutation lives on. But this sort of behavioral thing, I think, is a whole different level. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing. And I think about like alligators who are generally not pack hunters. They're pretty, I mean, they will be in groups, but they're really not pack hunters. They're really out for themselves. And think about, teaching your children how to go out and be independent and survive on your own. And it's just such a crazy thing. And then I saw a video yesterday, and I'm very skeptical of any video I see at this point because AI creation has become so realistic. Unless you're on the Deep Purple podcast trying to create something and then it's going to have three arms and John's an Oriental woman and whatever. But there was this video of a shark that pushed a turtle onto a boat because the turtle had a rope wrapped around its neck from a fishing net or whatever. And the shark was trying to get the turtle help. And at first I'm like, why would a shark try and help a turtle? Why wouldn't you just eat it? I can't imagine a shark has any, empathy. They're killing machines. And then I thought about it and I'm like, what if it realized it had the rope around its neck and it's like, I'm not eating that. You guys fix this and then I'll eat it when you throw it back in the water.
That's a possibility. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense, again, from a survivability,
Right.
evolutionary thing. Why would it behave like that? Yeah. I don't know.
Now, did you ever read the actual Jaws novel?
I did probably in the later 70s or early 80s, and have to say was kind of disappointed when you read that and compare it to the film.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just the characters are different, and it it goes to show you how much credit the screenwriters should get for the film. Because
Mhm.
I mean, the book as a novel, it's fine, and it's like, if there had never been any film,
Mhm.
it's fine, and it was a very, very successful novel. But I just, seeing the film first and then reading the novel, you're kind of like, this doesn't, sometimes when a film is based on a novel and then you go back and read the novel after the film, it's like, oh, it enhances this gave you more insight into some of the characters or whatever. But in this case, the novel is so different, the characters are so different, that it doesn't really do that, other than it explains a little bit more why the mayor behaves like he did.
Yeah.
So you've read the book as well, right?
I
Yeah.
have. I used to have a 45-minute commute to work each way, so I listened to a lot of audiobooks. And when I
Oh,
saw that
okay.
Jaws was available, I jumped on that. And I don't know how many times I went, what the hell?
Yeah.
Because it is so different. I absolutely think that it works as a book because you can
Right.
get more into the characters. You can explain who they are, why they are the way they are. In a movie, you lose so much of that
Mhm.
because you just
Yeah.
don't have the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially when half the movie needs to be the three guys out on the water and dealing with the shark.
Right.
But I think that there's certain things that they really made a wise decision to just not include the whole having an affair thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of that definitely did
Yeah.
not need to be in the movie.
Spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't read the novel, which
Oh yeah,
probably a lot of people haven't,
yeah,
but yeah, yeah. So Hooper and Brody's wife have an affair. Um, Nobody, the thing that struck me is nobody is really a likable character. And maybe
yeah.
that's something that, again, in a film, I don't know. I've seen a few films like that where it's like wasn't a single likable character, and I can't think of specific examples, but it seems to me like I didn't like the film either in the end, um but yeah, the characters just aren't that likable, and that's what's tough, right? If you
Yeah.
went into it, like if the novel had like even totally different names for the characters and you went into it that way, then maybe I wouldn't have been so disappointed in the novel after seeing the movie.
Right.
But because the characters are named the same, then you're just like, oh, this is, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
But
I feel like Quint was designed not to be likable in the movie, but God, how can you not like him? He's got great lines. He's just I'm not gonna go down. I'm not letting this thing beat me. I mean, he's got such a strength and confidence to him. How can you not like him? You have to.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's probably an incredible waste of time. But there's these people on YouTube that younger people that'll react to movies, and if I come across and I see they watched a movie that I love, like Jaws, I'll say, okay, let's see how they did it. And it was interesting. There was this one young woman, and she had been in the Coast Guard, and she's watching the movie, and when they're on the boat and Quint doing his thing, and she's just like, when I was in the Coast Guard, I probably met 50 old salt guys like this. And then she was pointing out, she goes, also, she was in the Coast Guard, she was on boats a lot. She goes, I love the fact that you're on the boat and that thing is rocking up and down like you can feel it. Where she goes, I've seen other movies and it's like they're on a boat and it's completely still,
Right.
like
Yeah.
like you're not even on the water or whatever. So yeah.
Well, because they actually did shoot it in the ocean as opposed to
Yeah,
a
yeah,
soundstage, or at least the majority of it. I mean, some of the pickup scenes that we'll get into were done on a soundstage,
yeah,
but and that caused a real problem for the actors because the actors were getting seasick as well.
yeah.
But the biggest problem, and I think this became a reason that the movie became so successful. So maybe this movie was a bit of a happy accident, but when they made the shark, and it's very mechanical, it's got metal in it, and a very intricate piece of machinery that they made to make this realistic and do all the things they needed it to do. They made it in a pool. When you take it out on the ocean, now you're dealing with salt water, which caused a huge issue. And why the shark kept breaking down was because it's rusting out, it's eroding very quickly in the salt water. Now, that caused a change in how the movie was done. Because if you can't depend on the shark, and that's where your whole point of tension is, you have to find another way to bring the tension. And I think it caused Steven Spielberg to be very creative in the way he was shooting scenes, in how you show the shark without showing the shark, and not
Hmm.
depending on the thing that didn't work to come out with a pretty incredibly terrifying movie. I think it was a happy accident. What do you think?
Um, Absolutely. Um, for sure, the fact that you don't see the shark hardly at all, really makes it. And I also think that helps the movie hold up because, you know, eh, movie goers that now are just used to CGI and everything will be like, oh well, that looks fake. And I have to admit, there's like one or two scenes that, yeah, it doesn't look too good, but yeah, just the, and I wonder too, Spielberg, before Jaws, he had done television for the most part, and I've actually gone back and watched. He directed some Columbo episodes, and I
Oh,
remember I rewatched one knowing that he had directed it. And I was like noticing, it's like, oh, look at that shot. I never even really noticed it, but it's like it really had nothing to do with the core of the episode, but it was like such a beautiful shot the way it was filmed. So I think um it's a testament to Spielberg's creativity too, because that could have sunk the movie, right? You got this mechanical shark that doesn't work, and you wonder how the screenplay was written. It's like, well, yeah, the shark pops out of the water here, and it's sitting there chewing on somebody, and or something like that. And it's just like, well, we can't have any of that. Right, so how are we going to work around this? So I agree, happy accident, but I think sometimes that happy accident gets a little bit more credit than it deserves, because clearly the direction and then ultimately the screenplay was terrific.
Well, that and I mean, it's a happy accident, but also creative genius to know what to do with it. To say, okay, we've got to find a way around this. How are we going to do it? Coming up with the ideas of, okay, let's do this and let's do that. And, also when you're filming it, you don't have the music to say, if we do this and we use this music cue to, show the shark. I mean, he knew the basic idea that John Williams was going with, but until that's recorded with the orchestra, you don't really understand the intensity of it. In fact, he thought John Williams was kidding when he played him the initial theme, because he played it on a piano. It doesn't have that deep, rich orchestral sound to it. And, so you're shooting the movie, you don't really even know what you've got to work with. Yeah. So it's interesting how that element became such a big part of the movie. But when you're shooting it, you can't, you're going to have something, but you don't even know what that something is.
Yeah. I mean, the other sort of happy accident is this, happens in terms of, not just the art world, but in general, where it just happens that you have the right group of people come together on the same thing at the right time, really. And I don't know if you've ever seen those honest trailers videos on YouTube, and some of them are funny, but they did Jaws, and I'm like, oh, what are they going to do with this? It's like my favorite movie, and it's just, they're going through all the stuff, and I think at the end they go, well, it's not hard to make a great movie. You just need a perfect cast, a perfect score, a great screenplay, right. and then and the greatest director of all time. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, it is kind of hard to make a good movie.
Right? Yeah. And then there's that meme that I love. Somebody just reposted it for the anniversary, that says, if you watch Jaws backwards, you see a very caring shark giving limbs to handicapped people. Yeah. So true. So a couple quick notes before we go through the film. If you guys are interested in more 50th anniversary Jaws extravaganza, on Corey Morissette's show, The Power of Positive Geeking, he did a 2-part episode on it, which was absolutely fantastic. And there's also an indie film of I don't know if it's part of the actual lore or not, but in the Piranha series, there was a film that was shot in Lake Havasu, Arizona, and it stars Elizabeth Shue, believe it or not. And it also has Christopher Lloyd, and it's Jerry O'Connell. It's a very interesting film. A bunch of my friends were extras in that film because it was shot in Arizona, so they were using a lot of extras to take advantage of the Arizona Film Incentive at the time. But the opening scene of this film, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is because we get in a little rowboat all by himself, wearing the classic jean jacket and humming the tune "Show Me the Way to Go Home," is our Jaws star Richard Dreyfuss sitting in the boat, who quickly loses his life to the piranha, and we're off on the film, which ties into the opening of our film, where we have a person out swimming and quickly loses their life to an unseen force. But there is a big misunderstanding about this scene, where it is said that she almost died because of the way that they jerked her around on the rope. She broke a couple of ribs. She has confirmed, the actress Chrissy, no, what's her name? Chrissy Backlany? Susan Backlany, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
has confirmed that no, she was fine. That she was perfectly safe, and there was really no issue there.
Yeah, and she was also hired because she was like a really strong swimmer and athletic. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I just wanted to point out too that you know, the scene, and we'll get into it, but the scene where, you know, Brody first is confronting the mayor about the shark attack, and the mayor says it's like, oh, well, not piranha. He says, you yell barracuda, and people
mhm.
go, what? Huh? You sell shark, and we got to panic. Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
You
I,
say
I
shark.
would
Yeah,
I would think Barracuda might also cause a bit of a panic.
yeah,
They're definitely one of the most dangerous fish in the ocean. So I would think if there were Barracuda out there, people would also be a little hesitant to get in the
yeah,
water.
yeah,
But you know, maybe not so much today. Today, people would be down there with their cell phones trying to catch it on camera, and getting into the water to get their video. And
yeah.
people are not as intelligent these days. But it is interesting, and I'm kind of surprised that I haven't at least seen that people have released like a line of Jawswear where you've got these anchor print suits and things like the Mayor wore.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, yeah. Well, like you said, the jean jacket or whatever. I actually saw. I think I reposted it on X or BlueSky, where it was Richard Dreyfuss sitting in a replica of the orca on Martha's Vineyard, singing "Show Me the Way to Go Home."
Mm.
So that was pretty cool. But yeah, yeah, Jaws weird. There was another T-shirt that it was sold out. I wanted to get it at one point, and it was like it said, "Re-elect Mayor Vaughn. We're keeping those beaches open." It's like,
Well, it's interesting. I did not know this, but I learned on the Power of Positive Geeking that Jaws 2 actually takes place 4 years later.
hmm,
And I thought, wow, so Brody kept going back to Martha's Vineyard as the sheriff, and because that, as I understand it, was just a summer job. So he kept, and they kept that guy as the mayor.
yeah, yeah. Well, again, and yeah, we'll get into it when we talk about
Yeah.
some scenes with the mayor and how the book sort of explains his
Mhm.
behavior. I almost think if they had taken one thing from the book, I think that because everybody, is like, oh, that mayor, what a piece of crap he is, and he is,
Mhm.
but there's a motivation there that um goes beyond what's kind of shown in the movie. So
Right.
that's interesting. Yeah.
They kind of made him like a Keystone Cop, kind of a bumbling idiot in the movie,
Yeah.
and I think like the way he was so shaky and oh you don't have the tooth though, so what you said couldn't possibly be true because you have
Yeah.
no proof, and you can't
Yeah.
you can't dispute what I want because you don't have that tooth.
Yeah.
They just kind of made him into a bit of an idiot. I understand his position though. I can appreciate
Yeah.
what they were actually up against and the danger of Brody screaming shark. I can appreciate that, but the way he handled it was just
Yeah. But then what was so interesting is how his character then comes up during the COVID shutdowns, and it's like those, that side of the coin that's like, no, we shouldn't shut things down, and
Mhm.
people are overblowing um
Right.
how serious this is, and it's like, yeah, kind of the same thing, kind of the same thing. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the thing is that people could still go to the beach, but when people go to the beach, they typically want to go in the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Myself, I like to walk at the edge of the water. I like
Mhm.
the water to come up to my ankles, maybe my knees. But let me tell you something, the power of the current of the ocean is shocking. You have to at times really brace yourself to not lose your balance, to not get sucked out in it. And I'm talking, a couple feet of water at the most.
Yeah.
It's and not only that, but you sink into the sand very easily with the way that the ocean is pulling the sand. So I could get up to my ankle in a second and a half, maybe.
Hmm.
So you've really got to be aware of how powerful the ocean is. So even if you're going to the beach and you're just kind of taking a casual stroll, it is reasonable to get sucked out into the ocean very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my sister has a place down at the Rhode Island shore, and there's this breachway that goes out with these rocks, and we were it was calm. We were out there fishing or whatever, and all of a sudden this rogue wave came, and it was like it came up to our thighs, almost knocked us off the rocks, and it's like we lost half our equipment. It was
Yeah,
like, where did that come from?
right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Then there's the randomness of those every, once in a while you'll get some wave that you're like, holy crap.
yeah.
Are the tides changing? No, it was just the buildup of the motion of, the water coming into shore and going back out, and it builds and builds and builds, and that's kind of the crescendo, and then it goes back down again and builds and builds. It's just the repeating process.
Mm.
The ocean is an amazing place because it's incredibly random, and you just never know what you're dealing with. And you can learn in life to protect yourself a lot against a lot of things, but as I always say, nature is the one thing that there's not a lot you can do. When nature does what it does, it's just going to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
taking point, that's the tsunamis. That's like, yeah, what can you do? No warning,
Hmm.
no nothing. It's just like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And if you've
It's so
ever
powerful.
watched the videos of how those just come in and take over a town,
Yeah.
it's terrifying. I mean, I can't imagine being involved in something like that, just waiting for that water to come and get you and realizing you can't run anywhere, you can't really do much of anything except try and stay at the water line
Yeah. Yeah.
at best, and maybe not get hit by everything that's floating around you. It's
Yeah.
an incredibly helpless thing. So I think one thing that was really intelligent about the way that they shot the opening was they did it at night. Um,
Yes.
there's something that just adds to that feeling of helplessness. You already can't see in the water,
Hmm.
but to do it at night, I thought that was just a brilliant way to open the film.
Yeah. Well, even backing up the opening credits, you get the theme, and you
Hmm.
get the POV of the shark just going through, some oceans and stuff. And yeah, it's then it opens at night, so it's campfire lit, right, with the
Right.
people on the beach. And one of the things too that you see throughout the movie is how kind of immersive it is too. I really, even to this day, it seems like a lot of films don't do this as well, where you almost feel like you're standing right there at the campfire, just like
Hmm.
looking at these people. You hear the harmonica, and just the way they kind of have. Yeah, I don't know if Harry Shearer was involved in that, but it's just like you kind of hear the conversations going,
Hmm.
almost unintelligible, really, but it seems realistic. Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. And speaking of the soundtrack, it was just re-released on blood red vinyl.
Okay.
Because of course it was.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because other than there's parts of the main theme that I think are great thrillers, and then there's other parts of it where it's almost just kind of calming. You've got the dun 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 dun, but then it goes like da da da, and it's almost kind of happy. It's a really weird theme when you really think about it.
It is like that. The There's the intensity and the fear, but you're right. And then other parts of the movie where it's yeah, almost playful,
Hmm.
the music, really, which it almost doesn't seem to fit, but yet it does,
Yeah.
strangely. Yeah. And I think, but that it almost helps too, right? Because as you were saying, it's like perhaps you can't, there's only so much intensity you can take,
Hmm.
where you need a little breather to make you engaged in the story again.
Well, and I think too, if it was intense all the time, I think at some point that wears off, no matter what's going on the screen.
Yeah,
You can only feel that tension for so long. You need those moments of comedy or just, moments that make you smile or peace or something like that. If you're just
yeah,
sitting there tense the whole time, by the time you get to the end, you're not feeling it anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting when I think about a movie like The Blair Witch, which I also saw in the theater. And thank you for mowing the lawn right now.
Oh, I thought it was going to be me, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
you
no.
actually. Yeah.
Uh, it's I think about the Blair Witch, and that movie also did the same thing. There were moments where they were fighting, and it was, you weren't necessarily thinking about the witch the whole time. You were thinking about, like just what their conversation and them not getting along, and how was that going to play out. And
Mm.
then there were moments when they're like, okay, now it's time to bring in the element again and make people afraid again. And it's such a balancing game to pull off a film like that. I think this is one of the films where it was done so brilliantly. They give you
Yeah.
enough, but not too much to take away from the impact of the last act of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So from the opening, though, I mean, that whole scene with Chrissy was absolutely amazing. Her fear, the screams underwater, which I think that was probably the biggest impact of that whole thing to me and really made you feel helpless because you're thinking about not being able to breathe and swallowing water and you're going to drown more than being afraid of whatever it is that's dragging you under.
yeah, yeah, and just yeah, again, as you said, at night too, that makes it that much more. Nobody's around, um, and uh, and also when it's dragging her around. Then when it finally takes it under, and there's just silence, you hear the little bell of the buoy, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. And that to me made that whole thing that much more intense because you're like you're you know it's agonizing what she's going through, and then just to have the silence, it's kind of like it makes the impact of her death that much more, I think, because it's
Right.
like, well, that's the end. This horrible thing she goes through, and then boom, that's the end.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think there's something, and I don't know if it's our own survival instinct that makes us want people in the films to survive.
Mm.
Unless they're an unlikable character. If they're an unlikable character, like in a horror movie, you've always got that one guy that's just really mouthy and thinks he's a badass. And you're like, will somebody get rid of this guy? And then everybody claps when he gets killed. But in general, there's something about us. Even when people are out in nature and people see like a lion take a zebra down and they know that he's gonna eat the zebra. And I hear people in the videos screaming, "Oh, I hope he makes it. I hope he gets away." I'm like, you're just rooting for one animal over another animal.
Yeah.
What is it about? Is it the victim thing? Like you don't want anybody to be a victim? Is it
Mm.
survive? Like I don't understand what it is in our mentality that makes us that way. But there certainly is something that even when we see people, we don't care about this woman. We don't know her. We don't know her name. We don't know who she is, whether she's
Mm.
a good or bad person. But there's something in us that wants her to get away.
Yeah, and I almost too. I think I talked about this with you at some point. Like nowadays, when you have these huge, action movies or whatever, it's like the collateral damage is horrible, and
Yeah.
it's like then the main character gets injured or killed, and it's like, oh my God, you're supposed to feel something. But yeah, with this movie, as you said, we you're just introduced to this woman. She's hardly said like a few words yet. It's like it's just the human the horror of what she has to go through, and it's like, yeah, you're hoping she can get away somehow, and yet the way she's being violently dragged around, you're just um and then the guy's passing out on the beach too.
Right.
That was a brilliant scene too, because you're wondering, it's like she's out there screaming or whatever. It's like, well, where's that guy? And then there he is, just passed out on the beach. Yeah.
I do think that added impact, but I was thinking about this the other day. Even if he wasn't passed out, if if he's just like, I'm not going in the water, it's at night, it's too cold or whatever, and he didn't want to go in with her, would it have mattered? What could he have done? I think it almost might have been a different kind of intensity if he's standing there screaming, Cressy, Cressy, and he's got nowhere to turn to help her.
Yeah.
That might have added to the tension of two people being helpless, but instead
Yeah.
it's making her more isolated. So it's a different kind of tension, but either way, the result would have been the same. I think
Yeah.
the ending though with just showing the buoy and hearing that bell toll, I think wouldn't have worked if he was standing there screaming. I think you're right. I think that had more of an
Yeah.
impact.
And I've often thought it's like, oh, what if they both went out swimming and both got attacked, but one somehow survives,
Mhm.
badly mauled? That would have, I don't think that would have worked as well either.
Yeah, well, I think about how that would play out with Brody and the mayor because
Right.
what you get is you get the arm washing up and they're examining the arm and you don't get you know that it was something that attacked them as opposed as you can't argue boating accident at that point. So you kind of need him to not have experienced that to set up the whole battle between the mayor and Brody.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah. So I guess leads us into kind of the next scene. So then it's like you cut to Brody and his wife waking up in the bedroom of their beautiful seaside house,
Mhm.
and they're asking, where are the kids, which again alludes to like different parenting skills in the 70s,
Right.
and Brody does this, they're in the yard, and then she's like, in Amity you say yard.
God, yep.
Yeah, yeah, and he's like, all right, they're in the yard by the
By the cat.
car. Yeah, yeah. Which again, like, you talk about the novel and where you have time to set up the characters, but then with this, you get that set up, and it's like, yeah, okay, these are kind of just sort of regular people. You don't even know who they are at the moment.
Right.
You know, and then the kid comes in with the bloody hand
Mhm.
because that he cut on the swing, and there's a little bit of a like, even yourself, it's like, well, I hope he's not going swimming with that bloody hand after just what happened or whatever.
Right.
But and then but they do this great job of introducing that he's the chief, and that it's a town where nothing ever really happens, because she's like, be careful, and he's like, in this town. And then there's just the little slight thing where she goes, I want my coffee mug back. Like he had taken a coffee mug from the house and was bringing it into the office.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
think one thing that I don't know if a lot of people really picked up on, but the whole thing with the bloody hand really ties back into sharks because sharks can smell one drop of blood from miles away. How
Hmm.
that is even possible, it goes so far beyond my understanding, but that is a very realistic thing. And they swim so fast, they can be there in a matter of a couple of minutes,
Hmm.
miles.
Yeah,
I that is so far beyond my brain.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's bizarre.
And
You know,
I kind of wonder. Well, no, it couldn't have been that set it up because they already had the shark attack. If they had that scene before the initial shark attack, you would wonder if it was that kid that brought this whole thing on, and if so, screw him.
oh yeah, almost kind of like a to the Hitchcock's The Birds, where it's like, was it Tippi Hedren that really brought the birds,
Mhm. Right.
to that
Yeah.
town or whatever, like what
Mhm.
happened? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I do like the way that they kind of introduce the family. It's almost one of those things like in Poltergeist where the dog walks through the house and you get introduced to all the people in the family just by the dog walking through the house. And
Oh yeah, that was a
you,
great scene as
Mhm.
well. Yeah, yeah.
You're getting a sense
But
of everybody and you're beginning to, but you start to care about them, right? You're automatically knowing that they're the protagonist. This is the family we're going to follow. These are the people that we're going to be rooting for. You're already given that premise without even knowing it.
yeah, and I'll tell you what, the one of the great things about this movie is you had great actors who weren't very well known. I mean, Roy Scheider had been in The French Connection, which was a big movie, but
Yeah.
he was not the star of the film by any sense. In fact, it's interesting how he was cast too. That actually Spielberg wanted he wanted Charlton Heston to play Quint actually, and I forget
Yeah.
who he wanted for Brody, but it was like he couldn't find anybody, and supposedly he was at a party and Roy Scheider was sitting next to him, and they started talking about whatever, and he's like, yeah, I'm doing this movie and I can't find an actor to play this character, and Scheider's like, well, I'm an actor. And it's like,
Hello.
Whether that's just folklore or whatever, but in any case, perfect casting, because he just seemed, and maybe too, like a little bit of, in retrospect, because I saw The French Connection after I saw Jaws, but in retrospect it's almost like, ooh, is he the character that was the cop in New York that, came out to Amity Island to, settle down
Right.
after
Yeah.
everything he's been through? Yeah.
But I think what was great about the way he played the character is, and I mean, obviously this was scripted, but here's a guy who is a police chief. You have to have a certain element of confidence to take a job like that and take on those responsibilities, especially when you're isolated. If you're in New York City, you've got police stations you can call, you've got teams of people you can work with. When you're on an island, you have your one little deputy who is not the most intelligent, deputy there, and then you've got really no one else. I mean, you're really the guy. So you have to walk into a job like that with a certain element of confidence. But and you get that the way he's interacting with the people, the way he's kind of controlling the complaints and all that. I thought it was such an important thing to show, but you see him terrified on the boat, you see him shaking, you see him deferring, you see him lacking any sense of confidence. And I love the way that his character breaks down in that way during, throughout the film, because you're thinking he's going to be the big bad hero of the movie. So, here's our strength and protagonist. But no, he was very human in this film.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so he goes and he meets the guy that fell asleep on the do we even get that guy's name? But
I think we do, but I don't even remember what it was. I think they
yeah,
talked about that on the Power of Positive Geeking, what his name was, but I honestly don't remember.
but the thing again that perhaps impacted me when I was 9 years old was when they're talking when Brody's talking to him, he's like, do you live here on the island? And he goes, no, Connecticut, Hartford. I go to Trinity. Well, I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and Trinity College I could walk to. My
Oh,
sister took
wow.
classes there or whatever. So it was like seeing that in this huge
Mhm.
blockbuster film. I was like, whoa. In fact, I remember questioning my brothers. It's like, did they like change the city or whatever in different versions of the film,
Mhm.
that he says he's from? And it's like, no, no. So that hit me too. Yeah.
I love those little things that we get to personally identify with in the entertainment world. Like in the song "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald," they talk about the bell ringing at the Maritime Church, and that was St. Mariner's Church in downtown Detroit, which I was stuck in front of on a very cold night, waiting for a shuttle that was never going to come because they were shut off for the night. But those little tie-ins are kind of fun.
Yeah.
An interesting side note about this scene, though, and I don't know who the person was, but huge props to the lady whose real arm that was in the sand with the crabs crawling all over it,
Oh,
because
oh, I didn't realize that was a
apparently
real arm.
they
Yeah.
had a prosthetic, but it wasn't believable. So they took somebody in the crew and they buried her in the sand with her arm sticking out. And whoever was brave enough to allow that to happen, props to you.
Yeah. And having the crabs on it, if it was just an arm, it would have been somewhat horrifying, but almost somewhat perhaps phony too. It just
Yeah.
seemed like, oh, this thing washed up on the beach and it doesn't take long for other things to be
Hmm.
looking for some food. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also the look, the deputy there is blowing his whistle for them to run up, and then the look on his face and the way he collapses in the sand, like, it's like, yeah, this guy, you haven't seen the arm yet, but this guy has seen something horrific that he has never seen in his life, and he's shaking. I thought the actor did a great job there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so easy to overplay a scene like that, but I felt it was very believable. And it kind of goes with what Ellen Brody said earlier on this island. You know,
yeah,
you get the fact that like the worst thing is a little bit of vandalism or kids getting drunk. And, you know, they don't ever deal with anything serious here on Amity Island. And you realize that, yeah, these people are not prepared for whatever they're dealing with,
yeah, yeah.
which I think
And
just
then
adds to the flavor of, you know, the idea of being in way over your head.
yeah, and then how Brody, like, he stops the guy from getting closer, and
Mhm.
he's just like, oh geez. And so you get a sense that as a cop in New York, Brody had seen some stuff, because he doesn't really get, they, the next scene, they're uh in the sheriff's office, and it's, or chief's office, and it's like the two guys are drinking Alka-Seltzer, the deputy and the student guy. But Brody didn't get sick, so he had obviously seen stuff in his job
Mhm.
as a police officer. but
Right.
uh but nevertheless, and then,
And I
yeah,
wonder how much Alka-Seltzer paid for that placement, you know,
yeah.
to have it
Well,
be their product,
I
you
don't
know.
think the product was shown, but it was just at
Oh,
that time, it's like
you knew what
a
it
bubbly
was.
a bubbly drink that if you're feeling nauseous. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
there was nothing else. I don't think like that at the time.
uh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And also props to the actress because not only did she agree to do that and had the crabs crawling on her, but that arm never moved. So she
yeah.
sat there in perfect stillness with that going on for who knows how many takes or for how long. I mean, man, that's some dedication when you really think about it. And I love when people really go all out to make films realistic. And you know, we don't think a lot of times about those little things, but it's really amazing the effort, the total effort that goes in to make a film be what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love these little scenes with Brody because while it seems like it takes a long time before we really get to the shark, these things are so important. We need to get on Brody's side. We need to understand who he is. We need to have this build up. Otherwise, yes, we could get into, they could just start from, you know, Quint and getting ready to go on the Orca. But without all this, we don't really appreciate what they actually are dealing with and how they got there. You need that build up.
Yeah, and I just think it's so clever the way they sort of do things with, like, these side characters and conversations. So you got the hint that's like nothing ever happens of consequence in the town from Brody's wife. But then when they're in the office here, they've seen this horrific thing, and then you got the secretary talking about the guy complaining that the kids in the karate school are chopping the picket fences,
Right.
and then this other guy's coming. I don't know if it's the same guy complaining, and Brody's typing up the report,
Mhm.
which he was he spelled coroner wrong on it too. I think that was a
Karuner, I think it
interesting
was.
thing. And then, but he, you see it just type shark attack, which is cool on an old typewriter too.
Right.
So it's just, I think that was more impactful, just the noise it makes, or whatever. But setting that up where, like, he's the chief in this small town, for the summer, and it's just like there's all these really minor complaints comparatively for this
Mhm.
stuff. So that sets that up beautifully,
Yeah,
really.
I
Yeah.
agree. And I think it kind of spelling coroner wrong. I'm not sure if they were trying to make him look inept because he's still the sheriff. I mean, he's still the chief, the guy that they, you know, trusted to take over this town. So he's not an idiot. I don't know if
No.
it was he was distracted or he was just trying to hurry up and get it done and spelled it wrong, but I do think that was kind of an odd thing. If they were trying to make him bumbling, there was really no need for that.
Yeah, there's so much in this movie that to me immerses you in realism. And it's like, in that time, you got this form, and let's say he was, halfway through filling out the form and he spells it wrong. What's he going to do?
Yeah.
It's obviously that's the word that needs to go there.
Hmm.
Um, So it's just like, yeah, I fat fingered it on the typewriter or whatever.
Right. I
You,
don't,
you
because I
know,
don't, I mean,
let's move in,
typewriters,
move on.
they weren't always equipped with correction tape back then. I don't think that came until the later 70s or early 80s, where you had that orange spool with the white correction tape on it, and you could, correct it and then type over it. Or
Yeah,
we didn't have whiteout
whiteout.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably had whiteout, but again, I'm thinking with everything going on,
Yeah.
he's not gonna bother with that,
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but these scenes are very important. We're also setting up the fact that he doesn't have the greatest team of people to work with either. I think that's
yeah.
important, that we're kind of already starting to isolate him and show that he doesn't have resources at this point. I don't disagree with him putting Shark Attack on the form, though. I mean, what else would you think it was? You're not going to think boating accident because he didn't say there were any boats in the area. He didn't, you just get an arm washing up and you're going to think some sea creature did that.
Well, also he gets the secretary hands him the phone, and she says it's the medical examiner's office. So he
Mm,
types that after, and that's important to the
right.
scene coming up too. So the medical examiner tells him it's a shark attack.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And I'm trying to remember what happens from there. Do they go back to the house, or is that when the killer whale washes up? Oh no, they go to the mayor
Killer.
next?
No, they go. Yeah. So Brody, he wants to make the beaches closed sign.
That's
So
right.
there's the parade going on, and he
Mhm.
goes into the art store, and he spills the paintbrushes, which again makes him. I don't know that it makes him bumbling, or more makes him just he's kind of like nervous, and he's got no help. He
Right.
gets the supplies and he hands them to the deputy, and he's telling them what to put on it. Beach is closed by order of Amity PD, no swimming. And then he says, have the secretary, whatever her name is, do the printing. And he's like, what's wrong with my printing? Which is, I just love how sort of real life it is. Like
Yeah.
I can't see like in a movie today that sort of little detail that
Hmm.
just like comes out. And also they pass the picket fence where that's broken by the kids with the
Right.
karate. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's when he meets up with the mayor who's marching in the parade. No, he doesn't. The deputy does, and he goes, "Oh,
Does,
we
yeah.
we had a shark attack on the beach this morning or whatever." Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think Brody and the mayor meet up until they're on the ferry.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the very next scene where it's
Yeah.
like then the deputy tells Brody, it's like, oh, these kids are doing their mile swim for their merit badges out in the bay. And
Mm.
that's when Brody goes out there. And that's one sort of thing in the film that they show the kids in the bay swimming, but it's like they don't deal with, did they tell the kids to get out?
Right. Yeah.
Or it's just kind of left aside. I don't know if there was something that got cut in the film there, but that was
Mhm.
something that always made me scratch my head.
Yeah.
Really, and probably seeing the film a bunch of times, I noticed that as
Mhm.
opposed to if you just saw it for the first time. But
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
good point. I mean, you would think that if you're terrified that the water isn't safe and you're having a discussion about the water not being safe, watching a bunch of kids being in the waters should be alerting somebody.
yeah, I think they tell the ferry operator, "Can you take us over to those kids?" But
Oh.
there's no resolution to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the film is pretty long as it is, because it takes us so long to get to the orca in the first place, and
yeah,
you know, you could just kind of assume, I guess, that the kids got yelled at or told to get out of the water or whatever, and then like, but we're trying to get our merit badges, and
yeah,
I'm sure there
yeah,
was some kind of discussion, but that's one of those things that even if they filmed it, you have to go, all right, this movie's like 3 hours long. We
yeah,
gotta start
yeah,
chopping unnecessary stuff. You can assume that it got dealt with, but
yeah. I just think that when they first introduced that concept, you think, oh, one of those kids is going to get attacked, and then
yeah.
when it doesn't resolve, it's like, oh, I guess nothing happened. But
well, I mean, you could also look at that and go, I bet there's people on the beach right now while you're arguing about making the signs and all that. You
right,
could just start by going to the beach and telling everybody to get off. We're closing the beach, and then putting the
yeah,
signs up. There's a lot of those types of things that could be. But I mean, I don't know if I were the sheriff. Yeah, I'd probably the first thing I would do would maybe be to go to the beach and just get everybody safe first, and then kind of work
yeah,
backwards from there, maybe. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So on the ferry, right, this is when we first get introduced to what the mayor is like, and kind of everyone that surrounds him, right?
Mhm.
So, the the mayor obviously has pull with the medical examiner because he's on there. And then the mayor's just saying, well, you're jumping to conclusions here. And then he just makes this explanation about, oh, a summer girl goes out for a swim at night. She gets tired and she gets hit by a boat and cut up by the propellers. And then the coroner's like, yes, maybe a boating accident. And Brody's like, that's not what you told me over the phone.
Right.
And then the coroner's like, well, we'll have to amend our reports. And at this point, it's like Brody's a little bewildered. And that's when the mayor takes him aside with the whole barracuda versus shark thing.
Right.
And saying, you don't understand. We need summer dollars. This is a summer town.
Mhm.
Which maybe is where we should bring up how the book kind of expands on that, the novel.
Yeah. Well. First, I just want to say Murray Hamilton did such a great job in this role. He makes himself so unlikable,
Mm-hmm.
and he does such a great job at it just being convinced that it's going to be fine. We're not going to have to deal with this. I don't want to deal with it, so we're just going to go forward. Like all that stuff that he brings to that character, his eye movements, his inflections, his shaky voice. Like I don't really believe this, but I'm trying to get you to believe it. So well played.
Exactly. It's that thing I'm sure you've dealt with people like that in real life where it's like they're just going to, they don't believe it themselves, but
Yeah.
they're justifying it in their mind and then justifying it to you. And because they don't believe it, you're not believing it either.
Right.
Um, and then also, I noticed there's the side character, the guy, the sort of heavyset guy with the mustache, and he's like the town newspaper reporter or whatever, and he pops up, and it's like you can tell that he's under the thumb of the mayor too,
Mhm.
because, yeah, it's just everybody there is agreeing that, oh no, you're jumping to conclusions, and we don't want this coming out and upsetting the summer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any smart politician, their first thing is going to be to control the press, right? Because
Yeah,
you don't want things getting out about crime on the island or anything like that that's going to
yeah,
deter tourism, because that's obviously their bread and butter. So, yeah, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put your thumb screws on the reporters and make sure that that newspaper's coming out that always shows Amity is the place to be.
yeah. But yeah, to allude how it was expanded in the novel, it's organized crime
Mm.
on Amity Island that's essentially getting protection money from all the businesses and whatever,
Right.
and it's like they're you know responsible for getting the mayor elected, but then it's like he's under their thumb,
Mhm.
probably to the extent of harm to him and his family. So he's not going to want anything to shut the beaches down.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So I think,
honestly,
oh,
I
go ahead.
do you feel that the movie was missing that element? Because I think that they did a pretty good job of making the mayor a character and giving him good reasoning without that, without having to go into that.
It's, to me, it's good reasoning up until the point where, the people, uh, the kid gets killed on the beach, because then it's like, okay, now there's two attacks and
Mhm.
people witness this.
Right.
It's a different story at that point, that because I could almost see like any rational person with no other motivation would be like, okay, yeah, we at least got to do something here,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But he's like, you know, no, no. Yeah. So that I don't know. I don't know. I just thought that, and again, to Murray Hamilton's credit, he's got those movements and just the way he reacts as if there is some external force to me beyond just the money for the town. Obviously, the money is important to the town, but there
Yeah.
seems to be he seems to be really stuck in stone for some other reason.
Like
Yeah,
he's a little more afraid than what the movie tells us he should be.
yeah,
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 okay, I could see that.
yeah.
And we'll get into this when we get into the scene, but the point that you're talking about with the Kittner boy, that should have been a bigger turning point for his character where he was like, all right, you know what? Yeah, I can't do anything. I'm caught. I'm caught in my lie. Now the only way I can save myself is to say, yes, I'm going to jump in and make sure that everyone's safe and I'm going to be the hero and pay Quentin. You know, he actually could have taken that turn.
Mm,
Um, and he didn't. Brody kind of forced, but we'll get into that when we get into that scene. But that
yeah,
that could have been a different pivot for his character, which I think could have made more sense
mm,
with the character we're given here
yeah,
versus maybe the one in the book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously Brody's like, I don't really care what you're gonna say. You know, I'm gonna put up with your politics to a certain extent, but I'm also gonna be more watchful and I'm going to take my own steps without taking the steps I really want to take.
Yeah, yeah. And so to me, this is one of the greatest scenes in the movie, not the Kittner boy, actually being killed, but the lead up to that. Because so now Brody's at the beach and they've kind of um they introduce in the midst of this that he doesn't like going in the water.
Right.
You kind of didn't know that ahead of time, but he's sitting there, and again, he's got one guy, Gavin, complaining about minor details about somebody parking in front of his place or whatever in the summer, and Brody's trying to look around him
Mm-hmm.
as what's going on. But I think before that, you see the heavyset woman floating in the ocean, and you see something behind her,
Mm-hmm.
and it's filmed so well that you're like, it doesn't really look like a shark fin, but then I don't know because we haven't seen anything yet.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
Well,
yeah,
but at this point, we still don't know that it's officially a shark. I mean, the only reason we know is because the movie is Jaws. We see on the posters that it's about a shark. But if we didn't know that going in, we wouldn't know if it really was a shark or was a different kind of sea creature. You know, we just know
yes,
that there's something in the water that's a danger.
yes, yeah, yeah. But I just think the tension in this scene, right? Because I don't want to sit here and describe the whole movie either,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I love it so much and I know it so much. But just that, the guy with the bathing cap
Yeah.
that's like colored grayish for whatever reason, he's behind the heavyset woman who's just floating, and then he goes under and comes up, but Brody's like looking like, is that a shark? And then he just takes a size or whatever, and then that guy comes out and talks to Brody, and that's where he's like, oh chief, we know about you, you don't like to go in the water. And then the comic relief of Brody just saying, well, that's some bad hat, Harry.
Right. Yeah, there's some great comic relief. I think that's much needed because as we go on through the film, it's going to get pretty intense. So it's a good element of comic relief through like a little tension, a little comic relief. Is there something out there? Let's tell a joke. Let's distract the audience. You know, it's such a great balance that we get throughout these scenes. And I really appreciate the reality of it. Also, to touch on all the extras and everybody that was there and put their effort in. It was freezing cold out there when they shot this. So for
Mm.
everybody to be out there and not shivering and not be, you know, curled up in beach blankets and everything to make this look realistic, kudos to everybody that you know put that effort in because that's saying a lot for people to be willing to do that for a film that's they don't know who Steven Spielberg is at this point.
Yeah, yeah. yeah. And yeah, so just again, the tension is building so much, and then the guy's talking to Brody, complaining about people parking or whatever, and Brody's sort of trying to look around, and then you hear this woman scream, and you're like, oh my God. And it's like her boyfriend or whatever comes up from underneath so that she's on his shoulders. But again, that's a very real thing that you would hear or see at the beach.
Yeah.
But if you were tense because you thought something awful was going to happen, that would, freak you out. Yeah. Yeah. So,
I don't know what it is about water because this even happens, I've lived in apartment complexes for the last 30 years or so, and often I'm placed near a pool and I just hear people screaming like at the top of their lungs because somebody splashes them with a little bit of water. And I don't understand what it is about even a small amount of water that makes people act that way. But you take, 300 people and you put them at the ocean and 200 of them are in the water. Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare trying to find an actual emergency.
yeah. 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 So, so yeah, so then of course the scene moves on, and there's that foreshadowing where the Kittner boy is pleading with his mother to just let me stay in the water a little longer, and she says, well, your fingers are getting pruned, and she says just 5 minutes more or 10 minutes more, I think.
Mhm.
um and then we get introduced to the for the first time, which I I didn't notice myself, but it's the trope that the color yellow signifies danger in the movie, because
Right.
the Kittner boy's raft is yellow.
Hmm.
But yeah, he goes out there, and of course, then we get the POV shots of the shark and the legs underwater, which you see a lot of those shots, and then it's horrific.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
wait, was the scene of the guy calling his dog was before the Kittner boy got killed,
yes,
right?
that's right.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
yeah.
we're
So
getting an idea now that something's out there because the dog did not come back from fetching the stick in the water. So now we're like, but that, I mean, if you think about it logistically, the dog was not out that far catching that
yeah,
stick, so he would have been further inland than a lot of the people swimming. So you kind of have to take a little bit of liberty with that. But yeah, so there's kind of the setup that there's something in the area.
yeah. I kind of find it funny too, as I said, I've watched people, reacting to the movie on YouTube or whatever, and it's like the dog lovers out there, they're like, oh my God, I don't care about people getting killed, but if the dog doesn't make
Right.
it, and I'm like, really? I mean, I feel bad for the dog, but come on, this little kid just got
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And people really do get very upset. There's people that will not watch movies where dogs get harmed in the
Mm,
movie. Like they'll have people watch it or tell them if there's any kind of dog danger. And
yeah.
it's amazing how triggered people are. Understanding that this is fiction, this isn't a documentary or
Uh,
this isn't
yeah.
real animals being sacrificed. This is all fiction. But yeah, people do get very triggered by that these days, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. But it again, kind of a sort of brilliant way of like just building that intensity a little bit more, and then it's like the guy's calling for the dog and it's not there, so like what happened to the dog? um I guess for the dog lovers, they could have shot an extra scene where it's like, oh, then he was just down the beach a little ways or
Right, right,
something,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
You see him coming down the road with Kittner's arm in his mouth, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
but it was a great precursor because you kind of get that out of your mind. They separate that from the actual kill enough to where you're like, okay, there's something in the water, and then you kind of forget about it, and then all of a sudden you see the raft flip over, you see the blood and all the thrashing around, and I mean that is such a brilliantly shot thing that I guess it was much more graphic in the initial screening, and they did cut some of that out because
Wow.
it was too much for the
Yeah.
audience. And I think that might have been one of the things that would separate it again from a thriller and a horror movie. Too much gore puts it in the horror category. And remember, again, we're talking 1973. We're not where we had movies like Night of the Living Dead or Psycho, you're still not seeing much of anything.
Mm,
Psycho's got one of the most famous murder scenes, and you never really actually see anything.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's all
psychological.
noise and cuts and
Yeah.
everything. And yeah. And then that scene where um they zoom in on Brody, um is again, it's like after building all that up with the false alarms, and then it's the sudden realization that, oh yeah, something did happen
Yeah.
here. And then then everybody's screaming, trying to get the people out. And it's like subtly that he doesn't go in. He's like, he barely gets his feet wet, but he's waving people out. So again, they set that up of him not liking the water.
Right, right. But
And
that I'm sorry, Mark, just to touch
no,
on
go
that
ahead.
shot real
Yeah.
quick. It's the classic comic book shot of the land moving at a different speed than Brody does. So it sends you into this uh, understanding that the world has become a little bit surreal for him. And
Right.
it's such a brilliant shot to put in a movie like this because it's the only time we see it, and it just sets you apart from reality for a second. And
And I
even though that's done on a track, to do that in the sand, where you're moving away to the camera, that's going to sink the track into the
yeah.
sand. I mean, from a production standpoint, kudos on making that as smooth as it was, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. And I had never seen a scene like that, I don't
Mhm.
think, in a movie up to that point. I don't, I was, as I said, I was 9 years old, probably didn't see a lot of movies anyway, but
Mhm.
that was just, it's striking, that scene.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, just, and then, the Kittner's mom, calling for her kid, and you see the raft wash up. And I know at the time, I had a friend that lived down the street, and his mother was like fairly young actually, and I think she had gone to see the movie, and she was saying, it's like, oh, what got me the most was that mother looking for her
Yeah.
kid. Like that would hit any mother
Yeah.
in the heart. Yeah.
Mhm.
um
It's like
yeah.
they've got something for everyone in this movie, something
Yeah.
that's going to trigger just about everybody at some point throughout this film. And I think that's a great way to make a film where you can take any average person in the audience and find something for them to connect with and be afraid of or upset them. I mean, you can't do better than that.
Yeah, and also how, like, the mom, she's older to have a kid his age, it seems.
Yeah.
It's striking to me, and it even seems more um odd now than it did then for some reason. I think because people look younger
Hmm.
as well. But that again, it's the realism. It's like there's older people that have kids.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like it happens.
Mhm.
They start later or whatever. So,
And there was
um,
no OnlyFans yet, so you had to kind of take what you could get.
yeah,
But yeah, I've always thought that was a little bit odd too, because she looks like she's in her 50s or 60s, and to have like a kid who's what, 9 or 10 years old, or probably
yeah,
younger than that, did seem, if they would have made it her grandson or her nephew or something like that, I think would have been a little bit more believable. But it's one of those things that you kind of think about for a second, but you get so wrapped up in her emotion that you notice it and then kind of dismiss it.
yeah. But then again, my mom being
Mhm.
41 when she gave birth to me, so I'm 9 years old. My mom's 50.
Yeah. And
Um,
Steve Martin looked like he was in his 60s when he was 12. So I mean, there are
and
people that do look older than
uh,
their age for
and
sure.
then I
Yeah.
used to look at my parents' high school yearbooks from the 1940s, and it's like, why does everybody look like they're 45 years old?
Right. But it's an odd casting though, when you think about it, it's like, why would you cast someone who has that look to be the mother of somebody who's so young? It's kind of an interesting choice because it's not like that role. I mean, she's very good in the role, especially, in the scene that she has coming up, but it's not like any good actor couldn't have done that,
Right, right.
so
Yeah,
it's an
yeah,
interesting casting choice for sure.
yeah. But again, I think the realism of the movie, as I said, the casting, not having any really big stars
Hmm.
in it, I think made it a better movie. And then
Yeah.
just to me, the people in the town look like regular people. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and a lot of times in movies, or I always used to crack up at like, um, my mom and my wife would watch some soap operas, and it's like, it's like everybody in that town is good looking. Even the homeless people and the criminals are like,
Right. Yeah.
like fantastic. And it's like, this isn't real.
Yeah.
I've gone to the hospital ER and no one looks like that. The
Exactly.
doctors don't
Yeah.
look like that, and the
Yeah,
nurses.
like high school movies where everybody's just hot except for the guy that's specifically not meant to be hot, or yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
yeah,
unrealistic. Yeah, and that, I mean, as a side note, I think that has caused a huge problem in society, because then young kids need to feel like they need to live up to those expectations, because that's what we're showing them society should be, as
yeah,
opposed to the reality of what it really is. But that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah.
But this, yeah. So did we skip the scene, or does it come later where the guy gets attacked in the rowboat? Was that before? I thought that was before the Kittner murder.
No, that's after.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because the next scene coming up is where the Kittner's mom offers a reward for the shark, and they're walking in the hallway. I guess it's the town hall or
Mhm.
whatever. And this is another one of those immersive things where it's like a big crowd of people and they're coming down the hall. And I assume this was a mistake where Brody's like his head smacks into this like swinging sign that's in front of some door or something, and they leave
I
it in.
wondered about that, kind of like the coroner thing, though. Was it something that they did to make him show that he's like really nervous or doesn't know how to handle the situation, or,
Yeah,
kind of playing along with that? I'm getting to be out of my element and don't really know what to do. Or was that just like, hey, that was kind of funny, let's leave it in because we need a little comedic moment in the middle of this tension?
yeah, I don't know. Or was it like also that he's like kind of an outsider, like he doesn't
Mhm.
know the town hall enough to like look
Right.
out for that sign.
Yeah.
um, but there's a subtle conversation going on as they're coming down the hallway, and that guy with the mustache, that's the news reporter, saying, I'm going to bury the ad for the bounty on the shark in the section with the grocery ads, so you can tell he's in cahoots with the mayor, like, let's keep all this you know off to the side
Right.
or whatever. And then they go into the meeting room, and again, what a great scene, because you're hearing the conversations. It's immersive, but like it's cleverly done, where you key in on that one woman with the glasses, and she's
Mhm.
like, well, I have my opinion because I own an inn, but how do you feel about it,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And then the guy makes the joke about the bounty on the shark being in cash or check, and that woman with the glasses is like, I don't think that's funny. I don't think that's funny at all. She deserved an award, that lady, because
Yeah.
she made the movie in her few little scenes or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's always interesting to to rewind a scene and listen to side conversation in a movie, and there's some good lines if you really listen to the people in the background, throughout this whole scene, and just the mumblings and the reactions and things, because this is one point where I think it's really not always realistic, some of the reactions of people, and I'm like, yeah, I get that they're supposed to do that, but is that what would really happen,
yeah, yeah,
But it's always
yes.
entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah, because then basically the mayor says, Chief Brody, explain what you're going to do, and you can tell he's hesitant to get to the point. He's saying, we're going to try to hire some more summer deputies and
Mhm.
this, and put shark spotters on the beach. And then the woman with the glasses pipes is like, are you going to close the beaches? And he's like, yes, yes, I am. And the crowd erupts. Now,
Mhm.
whether that would have happened, but there's that great, line. You hear it, I think, on a one ear, and it's like, uh, the mayor says, "Oh, only for 24 hours," which
Right.
is like ridiculous. And then you hear the woman go, "24 hours is like 3 weeks."
But there was kind of a weird thing in this dialogue that you just mentioned, that I've always felt might be out of place, is if they're going to hire shark spotters and close the beach, if you're closing the beach, what do you need the shark spotters for? Like that, that just kind of didn't really make sense to me.
yeah. It's a little disjointed, and it's uh, I don't know. I just got the sense that it's like Brody knows the right thing to do is to close the beaches, but he's
Yeah.
scared shitless to say that in that
Hmm.
room full of people.
And the
But then
mayor's sitting right next to him, you know.
he finally gets the courage to say it, and then the mayor just contradicts him.
Mm.
And whether the mayor did that in the moment when the people erupted, or whether all along he was like, oh, we're not closing the beaches for any length of time. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. And then,
I
of
think
course,
when you're a politician, I think you just always are in the mode of getting ready to augment or defend or, do whatever you need to do
knee jerk
to work the
react to the
crowd. Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind
Yeah.
of programmed for that kind of thing. So it again, that nervousness in his voice kind of gives you that just for 24 hours,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because now he's stuck. He's just had his police chief say, "I'm going to close the beach," so that's gonna happen. Now, what can I do to mitigate that? It's just one day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it only takes a day to find a shark, by the way, just so you know,
Oh
with
yeah.
with no
And somehow
resources
the
and
shark's going to go away
yeah.
in one day, when there's
Well,
nothing there.
and I do wonder in reality about that if you take the food supply away, how long does it take the animal population to go, all right, well, nothing here now, let's go somewhere else. I don't know that it would happen that quickly necessarily, but it's very possible. I mean, obviously sharks are intelligent animals. They
Hmm.
they know where to go, but as soon as you cut yourself on a clamshell and you go back into the water, they're going to be back.
Yeah. And I guess the movie it leaves it up to us to try to explain, well, why did the shark show up there in the first place?
Mhm.
And now it's like, so it's got a taste for human blood, and it's liking it. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so why don't I've been describing the movie scenes a lot. Why don't you describe what I think is one of the greatest character introductions in film ever?
Well, I've made up a name for what I like to call him, and he is a pro antagonist. He's a protagonist and an antagonist at the same time. And I mean, I'm talking about Robert Shaw's amazing performance as Quint. And he introduces himself into the meeting by scratching a nail across a chalkboard, which, as we all know and is common trope in life, is the most annoying sound on the planet. And I mean, what a way to get people on your side. You know? Obviously, it's interesting because it seems like it's a small island and everybody knows everybody else, but it also seems like it's a huge population on this island. So I've never really been able to get a grasp of the actual situation here. I mean, obviously it's a summer town. You've got people that live here all year round, but they depend on the mass tourist population. So you
Hmm.
can kind of start picking out who's an islander and who's not. But obviously people know who Quint is, and he's the old salty sea captain, is very much the trope of what you would expect. He's
Hmm.
got the inflections. He's got the I spend a lot of time alone mentality. He's very confident, and he's like, what you're paying is great, but if you really want somebody to go do the job, you're going to have to pony up. And what it's going to cost you to pay me to do it is going to be a lot less than what's going to cost you if you don't pay me to do it. I mean, it's almost a mob mentality tactic, the way that he comes in, but he's not wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If anyone on the island can get the shark, it's him. And we'll see what happens, before he gets hired to get the shark. But it's like, but it's just it, I mean, it seems like so planned on his part. I'm just gonna sit in the corner here. I drew a shark on the chalkboard
Right.
that I'm gonna scratch to get everyone's attention
Mhm.
or whatever. And then he's just calmly does this monologue, you know who I am, and I value my neck more than $2,000.
Mhm.
And if you don't want to be on welfare all winter, you're gonna pony up and pay me.
Yeah.
It's just he's in charge. He took charge of that room. He says his business, and then he's like, chief, mayor, ladies and gentlemen, and he walks away.
I love it. So cocky and confident. He didn't stay for a decision. He didn't need to because he knows he's their best shot at it. I also think there was kind of a subliminal thing with him putting the nail through the shark. Because if I remember right, he drew the shark and he scratches the nail across the shark. And I think that was a subliminal, I'm going to kill this thing,
Yeah.
and just kind of planting that seed a little bit. But this is such a brilliantly written and brilliantly executed scene. And it changes the entire course of what happens on Amity here.
Yeah. Again, actually, I have to say too, the way the three main characters are introduced is brilliant.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about how Brody's introduced, and you just start getting pieces of his character, and then this introduction to Quint, it's like, this is a badass fisherman.
But I also like that we're given the impression that he's just in it for the money. And we'll find out later that he has a much bigger purpose than that. I mean, of course, he's gonna take the money because I don't know how he makes his living in general, just boat tours or whatever. But obviously, he's got a bit of a vendetta, and he's in it for more than just the money. But we don't know that yet. We think, hey, he's an opportunist and a cocky one at that.
Right. Yeah.
So what is the next scene? I think is where we go. Is it back to the beach?
No, you got the guys at night with the wife's roast that they put on the big hook.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is another one of those where would the scene have been different if the mechanical shark was working? But basically, yeah, the guys said we better catch the shark and get that $2,000 bounty because this is my wife's holiday roast. When he says holiday roast, I'm assuming it's for 4th of July, which I don't think of a roast as a 4th of July.
Yeah, that's like a barbecue day.
Or like an Easter roast or something like that. But anyway.
Well, I mean, yes. how intelligent are these guys? Because we all know that the best place to catch a shark is from a dock.
Yeah. And they're worried too a little bit because they're like, oh, well, don't worry about it. The chief's house is on the other side of the island. Like, is he going to be cruising around at night looking for guys fishing for a shark off? Like, they're not, I don't know that they're doing anything illegal there, really, right? They're just,
right? I mean,
but
the thing that I didn't understand about this scene is, what is their plan? So they're gonna attract the shark with the meat. I get that, but then what do they think they're gonna do?
I assume they thought the shark will get hooked. It can't pull away from the dock, and it's just gonna tire and die, or tire enough where they could drag it in. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see
something like that. I mean,
that makes sense.
Yeah, but we get, so from this, without seeing the shark, we get a sense of its power, which we kind of got in the first scene, dragging Chrissy around. But this one, it has intensity to it, but it's played for the comic relief a little bit too.
It is,
yeah. So but they do the kind of brilliant, although perhaps unrealistic thing where it's like, so the shark, takes half the dock with it. One of the guys gets dumped in the water, and then you see the dock turn around and start coming back towards the guy.
Right. And
his buddy is just like, don't look, just swim, Charlie, swim. And it's really intense. You can't get up the dock or something. Then they finally get up. Yeah.
And I think that's got to be one of the most frightening things a person can experience. It's funny in movies when people are running from something, they always run in the same direction that the thing is coming. Like, so if a runaway truck is chasing them, they just stay in a straight line, running in the same line. Like, don't curve or, go away from the direction the truck is in. And I've never understood why movies are done that way, because it's just not realistic or intelligent. In the water, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And clearly you're running, you turn around, that's going to slow you down. If you're
Right.
in the
Yeah.
water, you're going to come to a dead stop if you try to turn
Yeah.
around and look what's going on.
And you can only go so fast, no matter how
Right.
much you flap your arms or kick your legs, you're only moving so fast in the water. I mean, really, they played upon some of the harshest fears that people could have.
Yeah, yeah. And then yeah, so he finally gets up, and then just a little comic relief. He's like, "Can we go home now?"
But I think this is one of those scenes where I don't know if having the actual shark would have helped because it's nighttime, the water's black. Even if, I mean, you could have popped a fin out of the water maybe, but I think we got some brilliant tension. I don't know that the shark would have actually added anything to this scene because we know what's happening without needing to see it.
Yeah, and then it's like the dock just sort of floats towards shore, like almost taken by the momentum, like the shark got itself loose somehow.
Mhm.
And yeah, yes, that was good. And I think it's that scene is kind of intercut with, we go back to Brody's house and he's looking at the book reading about sharks, and his
Mhm.
wife comes up behind him kind of quietly and scares him, and
Yeah.
she's yeah. And then again, the 70s parenting skills comes into play again, where Brody asks where his older son is, and the mom's like, he's sitting in his birthday present, and Brody's like, oh my god, and it's a sailboat, and he's
Mhm.
sitting in it out by the dock, and it's like, how old is that kid anyway? I mean, they're
It's like
not even watching.
4 or 5 years old, and yeah.
Yeah, well, the younger kid, yeah, and the one in the boat too, it's like, just like,
Mhm.
yeah. And then uh Brody's wife is like, oh no, let him have some fun, I don't think he'll ever go in the water again after what he saw on the beach today, which um yeah, so Brody's kids were on the beach too, and then one of them in the water there. But and then she flips through the book and sees the picture of a shark attacking a boat.
Right.
And
Yeah.
she's like, did you listen to your father? Get out of the boat right now.
Well, I love that the way how quickly she turned, but there was a key line in there that I think really helped with that because he's at the dock. The water's going to be fairly shallow there, but he said, "Did you know that most shark?" Or no, I think that line comes later, isn't it?
That's
When
later when he's
oh, okay.
talking yeah,
Because that
yeah,
line would have
Hooper.
made sense there if he
Hmm.
read that in the book and said, "Did you know that most shark attacks happen in 3 feet of water?" And then she saw that picture and looked up and yelled at the kid. Like that would have really worked there, I think, better than where it did later. But he was so defensive. She goes, "I don't think he'll ever go in the water after what you did today." And he's like, "Don't say that. Like, do
Yeah, I
you
don't
not
want
want him
that.
in the water right now after what
Yeah.
you, you
Yeah, I
know?"
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. But yeah, so that's a really important scene because now you understand that she's also realizing the danger and the gravity of the situation, and it's becoming more and more real to people spread as it spreads across the island. And people are, I think it's not just about the money. Now you have to also keep reminding people that somebody died, somebody else died, somebody else died, and this is a real thing that's happening. It's not about saving the town from the finances, it's about saving their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.